Hello, my name is Rich Procida. I'm the founder of the Truth and Democracy Coalition and the host of Democracy Under Fire. Before we begin this episode, I want to tell you about a few events we have coming up. On Thursday, June 9th, we will be having our January 6th Select Committee hearing, Watch Party and Speak Out. The event will begin at 4:30, but you can come anytime while the hearing is going on. We'll fill you in on what's gone on, and we'll share our company and the good food. We also have a number of virtual events where you can attend from anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. On Sunday, June 12th at 2 p.m. Pacific time, we will have psychologist and political analyst Karen Tamarius to speak to us about persuading those with whom we disagree. A very important skill now that we have to bring the country back together again to defeat authoritarianism. To register for that event, go to tinyurl.com/smartpolitics. On Sunday, July 10th at 2 p.m. Pacific time, Minister Dom Jones and I will discuss religion and the freedom to choose, abortion, Christianity, and democracy. To register for that event, go to tinyurl.com/abortionreligion. Finally, on Sunday, August 14th at 2 p.m. Pacific time, we will have Per Norback, the founder of the Swedish Internet Party, to talk to us about climate change and democracy. To register for that, go to tinyurl.com/climate democracy. I hope you enjoy this episode of Democracy Under Fire. Why don't you guys take it away, Guy and Kit?
Kit, go for your introduction, and then I'll introduce myself.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Rich, for inviting us to do this presentation. We think ranked choice voting is one of the most promising democracy reforms available. So I was never very politically active until at some point I noticed that the national political climate was so toxic and ugly, and it was so disturbing that I couldn't sleep. And after a couple of days of this, I remembered my brother from Austin, Texas, telling me about ranked choice voting. And I could see what a big difference that would make in the state of politics and how things could just be a lot more smooth, effective, and people could start getting things done. And I started volunteering with ranked choice voting, and I've been sleeping well. So this is self-serving, but yeah, I hope that you all find some hope here as well. So with me today is Guy Cammilleri from LA.
Thank you, Kit, and thank you, Rich. Super excited to meet all of you today. I was in the private sector for, over 25 years. And about a year and a half ago, I took a break and wanted to try to figure out how to do something that might be a little bit more meaningful to me. And I realized I wanted to go into electoral reform, and I didn't know how to get my foot in the door. And one day found an internship at FairVote, Virginia. And they focused on ranked choice voting. And it was one of the many reforms that I was very interested in and I thought could really make a difference in our current political environment, and started volunteering with them. And through them, and because it was the middle of the pandemic, we all meet on Zoom. And so it didn't matter that they were in Virginia and I was in California. I started learning through them, and then got connected with a group called Rank the Vote National, and started helping them with coalition building. And then they helped to co-found and incubate a group here in California called the California Ranked Choice Voting Coalition. And that launched in September of this past year. And I've been helping them to grow ranked choice voting throughout the state of California and focusing on cities and eventually a statewide initiative. And so with that being said, being involved in the electoral reform space, I met Kit, which has been great. And through that, we met Rich here, and here we are today. So nice to meet all of you. Thank you for having us.
So here we are. We're Kit and Guy. We work at different organizations, but there's definitely a network nationally, and we're all working together. So we're working to bring ranked choice voting to more places in the United States because we want to upgrade our elections, and we believe that this systemic change can help Americans work together. And the way we elect officials is so important, and we want to elect officials who will work for consensus instead of division. So what's wrong with our current elections? So our current elections, that like if you have 5 candidates and you can pick one, you're punished. The voters are punished for wasting their vote if they don't choose one of the front runners. If they choose their actual favorite, sometimes they just waste their vote. It also lets unpopular politicians win by allowing candidates to be elected even when a majority of voters oppose them. Elections are toxic because candidates are incentivized to beat down their opponents and exaggerate differences. Elections are vulnerable to manipulation because when more than 2 candidates run, the elections are vulnerable to vote splitting and the spoiler effect. And 2 or more candidates running on similar platforms penalize and divide their shared base of supporters. And then it also limits participation because new candidates are discouraged from running, and new parties really can't form. So how does ranked choice voting help? So your vote really counts when you can vote for your favorite, knowing that you have a backup choice if your favorite comes in last. Fresh candidates can run without fear of being treated like spoilers. And I think we can all benefit when newcomers can enter a race, share their perspective without fear of diluting the political power of similar candidates. Strong independents can participate without being accused of interference or irrelevance. And problem solving is rewarded, where people who are running have a real reason to emphasize areas of common agreement, as well as what makes them the best choice. And in ranked choice elections, candidates tend to focus on issues and treat rivals with more respect.
So let's talk about, let's take that and talk about how our current system is. And almost all of you know this. We have a system that is called first past the post plurality voting. So if there's only 2 candidates in an election, one of them is going to get 50% plus 1, 50% or more. So in this case, you have milk chocolate running against candy corn. Milk chocolate wins 55%, 45 to 45%. It's very straightforward. You have a majority winner. That's how democracy is supposed to work, right? But then, unfortunately, in our system, we have spoilers, because oftentimes you have more than 2 people in a particular race for an office. And so let's say in this case, dark chocolate enters the race. So now we have a situation where milk chocolate and dark chocolate split the vote because people like chocolate, but they like different types of chocolate. And candy corn gets its same vote that it would have got last time, 45% in this case. And so in our current system, candy corn wins, even though a majority of people would prefer some flavor of chocolate. You ultimately have a lot of politicians in our system that represent a minority of the voters instead of a majority of the voters in any given district. And so that's something that we can solve for with ranked choice voting.
Right. The chocolate voters are not too happy about this result.
Right.
Yes. So now primaries. We often have primaries to winnow down a large field of candidates. But the problem with primaries is that they sometimes pick two candidates that don't have even half the support. So here's a recent example that illustrates this problem. Were any of you following the election recently in France, April, well, just this month? There were 12 candidates in the primaries. And the results of the primary, the top two candidates, a center-left Emmanuel Macron and far-right Marine Le Pen, went on to the runoff election because they got the most votes each. But progressive Jean-Luc Mélenchon, I don't know how to pronounce, he placed a close third, and 27% of the voters voted for other candidates. So if this had been a ranked choice election, voters would have had a stronger voice. That 27% would have had their next choice counted, and we can't know for sure, but the results might have been different.
Another issue in our country, as we all know, is the increasing political polarization. And our electoral system, unfortunately, exacerbates that problem. When you have a system where a candidate who doesn't get a majority of the votes can win, and you have a system where more than two people can run, and one of those persons plays spoiler unintentionally, you have people now strategically voting. We've all done it, where you prefer one candidate, but you don't vote for your preferred candidate because you're worried that that will take votes from your second favorite candidate, throwing the election to a candidate who you don't like at all. And so this ends up reinforcing our current two-party system in a way that, especially with a primary dominant electoral system, most of the candidates in our country in our cities are chosen in the primaries by a small minority of voters, leading to more political polarization, because now anybody who is a viable candidate is really only going to cater to the primary electorate that is either very far to the right or very far to the left politically, making most of the candidates who end up in office not very representative of most of us, who are probably somewhere in the middle.
Exactly. So you may have read that more than 40% of Americans don't identify with either of the two major parties, but our voting method drives voters and candidates, for that matter, into one of two corners because we really essentially just have a binary choice.
Right. And so if we look at what ranked choice voting can enable us to do, let's say I voted spring first in this case, summer second, fall third, winter fourth, and spring for the majority of the electorate came in last. While my vote for spring, while my vote might be eliminated, my first place vote might be eliminated, I still have a second place vote. So, and summer would get my vote instead. And so the example here would, let's say we're in an election where you have a very liberal Democrat, a moderate Republican, and a very conservative Republican. And let's say I am a super liberal Democrat. Normally in that election, I would not vote for my first choice for fear of taking votes from who might be my second choice and throwing it to somebody who I don't support at all. In ranked choice voting, which is beautiful, I can vote for my first place choice and my second place choice, not worrying about spoiling the election.
So you're about to vote in a ranked choice election, and it won't be this one, but I wanted to show you this ballot. On this ballot, the voter put spring in first choice, summer in second choice, fall in third choice, and winter in last choice. So these are the candidates that you will be voting on in just a minute. So think about what's your favorite summer activities. Now, this is obviously a Washington State-based election. So if you were going to visit Washington State, how would you rank your favorite activities? There's ferry ride. There's a sightseeing. That's the Chihuly Museum. There's hiking. There's Mount Rainier in the background. Water sports out in the San Juans, sailing, kayaking, paddleboarding, or garden tours. There's loads of gardens too. So here's what your ballot will look like. You'll put your first choice in, you click one of these in the first line, and your second choice here, and so on. So Guy, I'm going to ask you to put that link in the chat. And
I've dropped it in the chat for everybody. So please click on it and rank your choices, and then we'll show you guys how it ends up.
Campaigning is fine if you want to unmute and say something special about your favorite activity. Give it a little boost. Maybe see if you can pick up some second choice votes. We might need some second choice votes to win here, unless somebody wins on the first round.
We have a vote in the chat for kayaking in San Juan.
Kayaking in the San Juans, that's a popular one. Okay, I've been watching the back side of this, and I've seen some votes come in. So I'm going to, there's one more just came in. I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to look and see what happened with this election. Okay, so you all can see the tally, I think, with these colored bars. And we've got 76 votes in here. Guy and I haven't been stuffing the ballot box. We've used this in other presentations, and that's why there's so many votes in here. And we have hiking has come in first with 30 votes, or 39%. Water sports is second. Riding the ferries is third. Sightseeing is fourth, and garden tour came in last with 8%, or 6 votes. So in a ranked choice election, we're looking for a candidate to get more than 50%. And 50% in this graph is represented by the dotted green line over here on the right. So hiking's doing pretty well, but they don't have 50%. If this were a single winner election, they would win, but we've got, quick math, 61% voting for other candidates. So we're going to eliminate the last place candidate, which is garden tour. Sorry for the garden tour people. And we're going to give the garden tour people their vote on their second choice. So all the other votes stay right where they are. You could imagine you might be standing in line with the other people who had your first choice, unless you're garden tour, and then you are going to just walk to the next line. I'm going to click this arrow on the right and go to the second round. And the garden tour people split somewhat evenly, but none of them really want to get out on a little kayak. Oh, somebody just voted for water sports.
Somebody's stuffing the ballot box right now.
Well, this app won't let you vote twice.
That's true. Good point. Good point. Yeah.
Somebody's
like, I better get my vote in.
Yeah. Well, paddleboarding is my favorite. So that's the line I'm in over here, the orange line. We still don't have 50%. So we're going to have to eliminate another candidate. We're going to eliminate sightseeing and see where the sightseeing votes go for their next choice. Everyone else stays in the same line. Water sports is not picking up many second choice votes, are they? But we still don't have a majority candidate, a majority winner. We're going to eliminate the last place candidate, which is Washington Ferries. And then hiking wins by a pretty good margin. Water sports was doing okay, but they just didn't pick up many second choice votes. So I saw a hand raised. If you have a question and want to unmute yourself, now could be a good time and ask a question.
Hi. So I see here we're voting in rounds, and I'm wondering how those rounds work in real time. Do you hang around the voting booth? Is this remote, done remotely, or what happened?
Great question. Now, in the caucus method, if you're familiar with that, people are all in one big room and they go stand in different corners. And then one candidate gets eliminated and they walk to other places. In ranked choice voting, when you fill out a ballot the way you just did, that ballot can go into one of the ballot counting machines, and with the right software, it can be almost instantaneous. So the machine will eliminate candidates and take the next viable candidate on the ballot until that one candidate gets.
We also, to add to what Kit shared, it's also called instant runoff voting. And so because we get to vote for all of the candidates or any number of the candidates at that setting, the machines now can immediately tabulate, which saves us the cost of having to do either primaries or runoffs, depending on the municipality.
So can I ask again, this has to happen, so everybody has to be in a group somewhere to do this?
No.
Because,
No. It would work just like today's elections. The different you'd vote however you vote via in person at your precinct or via mail. But instead of just getting to choose one candidate for that office, you could rank the candidates in your order of preference. But the way you vote is no different than it is today.
Except the ballot is different. Yeah.
The ballot's different, but nothing else is different.
I see. So I see. I'm sorry. So the second round, it isn't something people actually choose. It's just a reshuffling based on the. I got it. Okay, thank you.
Right. So if you're looking at the screen right now, hiking only has 39% of the vote. So the way things work in the United States today is hiking would win, even though 61% of the people are against hiking. They don't want hiking, but hiking would win anyways and be their representative. In ranked choice voting, we wouldn't be done because nobody passed that 50% threshold yet. So the last place finisher, Garden Tour, well, the people who voted Garden Tour first, they presumably voted for a second place candidate. And so, as you saw, Kit just moved on to the second round, and those second place votes now got added to the remaining candidates. And that will happen so on until somebody passes 50%.
Yeah, I think it was confusing when I said you would be, if you were standing in line, you would be walking over. That's sort of left over from when we did demonstrations like we go to a brewery and do a demonstration of ranked choice voting. But yeah, it happens automatically with the software. So there we are. And now let's see if I can get back to, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm having a hard time with
Can I follow up this question with just one other thing while you're doing that?
Right.
Sure.
So this is done via a website, I imagine, of some sort. And is that right or no?
Well, what we watched on the screen is done via a website. In real life voting situations, we would have our voting machines like we do now, right?
Yeah,
with paper ballots. So
with paper ballots. Yep, back up everything. Yep, just like we do now, except we would need them in ranked choice voting. You'd have instant runoff voting possibilities, which allow us to get to a majority winner without having to have a runoff election.
Thanks for those questions, David. Appreciate it. Yeah. Okay, so Guy, what are some of the benefits? What are some more benefits of ranked choice voting?
Yeah, so as you guys saw on that mock election that we just did, now with ranked choice voting, you no longer have to be worried about voting your preference and voting your actual choice. You can do that while voting for a second choice and third choice and not worry about spoiling the election and throwing it to your least favorite choice, which is what happens a lot of times in the US these days. From a candidate perspective, that also leads to a much broader, wider array and diversity of candidates, because what happens in today's races is a lot of candidates are discouraged from running because they might be similar to, let's say, the Republican in the race or similar to the Democrat in the race, but they're not the party-backed candidate, and so they're pressured to drop out so that their people who vote for them don't take votes away from, let's say, the party-backed candidate, throwing the election to the opposite party. And so that for sure is one of the big benefits.
Yeah, we saw how
Yeah.
voters who wanted garden tour, maybe they knew that it wasn't a popular candidate, but they could say garden tour was their favorite. And so we got a better idea of what people are really interested in. So like Guy was saying, a major benefit of ranked choice voting is it gives voters a stronger voice and more choices. In fact, in places that use ranked choice voting, we see more women and people of color and third parties and independents running in elections without fear of being spoilers. And voters have more viable choices because they can vote for their favorite candidate, knowing they have a backup choice. Minneapolis has used ranked choice voting since 2009, and exit polls show that voters overwhelmingly like it.
So another benefit is RCV promotes civil, more issues-focused campaigns. Here we see a couple pictures of candidates who, while they were opponents, they realized that they had a lot of overlap and issues, and they did agree on a good number of things. And so instead of disparaging the other candidate to get ahead, they basically said, hey, vote for me first, but my candidate, my opponent here, is pretty good too. So please vote for them second. And so what we've found nationally is RCV promotes more civil campaigns. And when the campaign is more civil, you can actually debate ideas instead of throw out the negatives of your opponent. Kit?
Yeah, so they aren't running negative campaigns because, so imagine you're running for election and you're out knocking on doors, talking to voters, and you come to a house with your opponent's yard sign. Well, normally you would just skip that house because the voters made up their mind and you don't want to waste your time. But if this is a ranked choice election, that changes things. You realize, well, you can still ask for that voter's second choice vote. And if you want their second choice vote, it's not a good idea to sling mud at their first choice candidate. So the best strategy is to be civil and talk about what you stand for.
And I mean, this is a big benefit, right? Because elections are run on taxpayer dollars, and we're all taxpayers. And ranked choice voting simply saves money, a lot of money. Oftentimes, with certain ranked choice voting cities, they eliminate the primary altogether and move make the general the primary and general election. They can do that because of the way ranked choice voting works. That also means that there won't be a runoff, which also saves the city's money. This example is a Washington-based example, so I'll defer to Kit on that. But I know in New York City, runoffs typically cost $15 million, and now they don't need runoffs because of ranked choice voting. We've done some analyses here with cities in California that we're working on, and inevitably it saves a ton of money. Especially, we've already seen it over and over again in election cycles up in the Bay Area where we have already have ranked choice voting established and being used.
Right. So to repeat that, ranked choice voting saves money when it combines the primary with the general election. So you run one election instead of two. And candidates save money also by only having to run one campaign. And this helps lower the barrier to entry and encourages new candidates to run. So does anyone have any more questions at this point?
I see David has his hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry to keep coming up here, but so what I'm wondering is, what are the obstacles to convincing municipalities to do this? Or on the flip side of that is, who benefits from the current method?
We can take that right now for a little bit. So the obstacles are a lot of current elected officials know how to play the game the way they're doing it now. And they're not really inspired to change the method that got them elected. Also, campaign managers, especially in the two parties, have their strategy mapped out for this election method. And there's a lot of this election method is one of the most vulnerable to strategy. And so they're a little hesitant about giving up their strategy. The other thing is election officials are rightly concerned about changing the way we vote. And so there are some election officials are enthusiastic about changing it and seeing it as a more of a creative process. And some are just really want someone else to go first. Our county auditor would really like to see another county go first. So those were the barriers. And any more?
Yeah. Yeah, I might add to that. One of the points you made about, a couple of points. First of all, about officials that already know how to work the system don't want the system to change. The people in power already have power based on the current system. And those people also rely on their campaign managers, as Kit had mentioned. Imagine if you're a campaign manager and you get to charge, you earn a living based on 2 elections rather than 1, or a runoff election. You're going to get paid. Now you're thinking, I might only get paid once instead of twice. And so that person's going to influence the candidates to be against it. So the system that exists is naturally going to resist reform. And that we found. The other thing I found in states across the country, states that tend to be more dominated by one party or the other, the establishment in that state tends to resist. So here in California, it's a good number of establishment Democrats that resist this reform. And we found in Florida, it's establishment Republicans that resist the reform. That's not universal, but we have found that trend. People in power don't want to dilute their power, and they think they're doing that with this reform, but quite honestly, they don't understand the reform. The reform just allows, it's nonpartisan, it just allows the states or municipalities to be more representative of the people, of the voters.
All right, so Karen asked how major parties respond to the idea of ranked choice voting. It varies. I have to say in Utah, a lot of Republicans have really embraced ranked choice voting. And in Virginia and some other states, I don't remember, they used ranked choice voting in their party nominating conventions. And they find it really helps them find the consensus candidate, especially when the Republican Party is so split right now. And so I think inter-party, they're finding out that it works pretty well, helping them find the most popular candidate. And then statewide, it depends on which party is in power. The party that's in power doesn't want to change the voting system because they don't know how it will change things. The thing is, it doesn't change the results of the elections all that much. 90% of the time, in a ranked choice election, the person who got the most votes on the first round wins the election. And what changes is the way the election is run and the way candidates are interested in getting second and third choice votes. What changes is the incentives for politics, which I think can make a huge difference.
I might add to Karen's question at the end there, what ideas to overcome the resistance? What we found is it's just education. When we have, and I can speak specific to city examples here in California that we've been working on, when we have a chance to actually sit down with the staffers or the council members themselves and explain how it works, that's half the battle, because most people actually don't understand how it works. Most politicians haven't thought about it. They've only thought about the system as it is. And so education is a big part. Also overcoming resistance is developing coalitions and relationships with interest groups that the politicians rely on. So, depending on what state or city you're in, it could be labor, it could be the Chamber of Commerce, it could be church groups. It really just depends. and developing and educating those groups to the power that ranked choice voting actually exhibits and what type of representation that exhibits. Moving on from that, Lisa, you have a question about, did the New York City mayoral election work the way it was intended, or there's still issues to work out? The answer is yes, it worked. There was some bad publicity in the very beginning, but that had nothing to do with ranked choice voting. It had to do with the elections board, human error, which would have happened whether or not ranked choice voting existed. But if you look at the new city council that just came in based on the ranked choice voting election, it's the most diverse and representative city council in New York City's history. And the only thing that was different between this past election last year and the ones prior was ranked choice voting. And so there's a lot more detail in New York City we could get into, but that's sort of the 30,000 foot answer to your question there.
And then David, you asked, what did I mean by incentives? The current method incentivizes, I don't like that word, but I don't have a rewards. The current method rewards politicians for mudslinging and divisive campaigning. And so we want to reward politicians or campaigners for offering solutions, for campaigning on issues, and reaching for common ground and reaching out beyond their base to find a broader base of support, even if they're not their first choice. So we'll have some time for questions again at the end if that's still not clear. And let's see if I can figure out how to share. I've got a short video to share, and it's about 90 seconds, and then we'll come back.
Politics is tearing us apart, and it's because elections aren't working for most of us. Here's why. In the US, each of us can vote for the candidate we like the most, but whenever more than 2 candidates are running to win 1 seat, it's possible for most voters to hate whoever wins. Because of this split vote, politicians can ignore the will of most voters and still win. Ranked choice voting gives you the freedom to select a backup choice to prevent that from happening. Let's say a group uses ranked choice voting to decide what to eat for dinner tonight. Each voter selects their favorite dish, but also has the option to choose backup dishes. If one food receives more than half the votes, it wins, just like in any other election. But let's get to dessert, where the competition is more fierce. What if no ice cream flavor has more than 50% of the vote? Under a normal race, vanilla would win, even though a majority of voters didn't pick it. With ranked choice voting, the flavor with the fewest votes is eliminated, and voters who chose that flavor as number 1 will have their votes count for their next choice. Everyone gets a say, no one wastes their vote, and the winner is the flavor that the largest number of people agreed upon. That's ranked choice voting. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. You get more voice and more choice, and that makes elections better for all of us.
Well, we'll talk about where ranked choice voting is used. Maine uses ranked choice voting for federal elections and the presidential primary, and Alaska will be doing the same in 2022. In other states, it's used in presidential primaries, in local elections, in internal party elections, and in military and overseas ballots. And this map is a little out of date because, as I was telling Julia and Deborah from Georgia, Georgia has started using ranked choice voting for military and overseas ballots as well. So, Guy, how is it working?
Well, it's working great. As you guys can see from these numbers, 70% of voters approve of ranked choice voting in exit polls. So this is after they've already used it, and they're like, "This is great. We like it." 70% in today's polarized environment is a pretty high number. 68% of voters do rank multiple candidates. In other words, while they have the choice in ranked choice voting to still go in and vote the way they always have, i.e., pick their favorite candidate. Now they do go in and they understand it enough to rank multiple candidates. And really impressively, 90% of voters, when asked, say they understand RCV and that it's simple. One of the biggest, going back to one of the other questions that came up was, one of the reasons why politicians, or one of the reasons politicians use to resist ranked choice voting, they say, well, it's confusing to voters, and so it will disenfranchise voters. And the exit polls just don't bear that out. So that's really encouraging for us, and we, it's one of the things, we really feel confident when we are going in to talk to existing politicians to support this.
Now, we want you to be aware of one other important way that ranked choice voting is used. It's called proportional ranked choice voting, and Cambridge, Massachusetts has been using it since 1941. So in proportional ranked choice voting, when you're electing a council, 20% of the voters get 20% of the representation. With our current voting method, the largest block of the voters gets all the representation, and the rest of the voters get none. So what this does is to ensure proportional results, and it boosts representation for smaller groups that might otherwise struggle to get representation. When in proportional ranked choice voting elections, usually over 90% of the voters get at least one council member they support, so voters can see that their vote matters. So here's how they do it in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Instead of electing each council member in a separate race, the candidates for all the seats run together in a pool for city council. They use a ranked choice ballot, like the ballot that you used for the summer activities, and the top candidates get seats on the council. And the cool thing is, as the city votes on the pool of candidates as a whole, there's no drawing districts, and there's no arm wrestling around district lines, and gerrymandering can't happen. So there's this cool, if you're interested in voting methods, you might enjoy this video. We'll put Politics in the Animal Kingdom. We'll put the link in the chat at the end here. So if this sounds good to you, I urge you to join the group in your state. Election laws are different in every state, and each state has its own ranked choice voting group. And we'll put a link in the chat where you can find yours if you want.
Yeah, I just dropped the link in the chat. So when you click on that, it'll bring you to a page that shows all of the states and what's going on in the various states, depending where you're at.
Okay, so we will stop talking and see if you have any more questions. Steve, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I've looked at the CT Gray video on the tube, and I thought it was very intuitive. Makes a whole lot of sense. I'm a huge proponent of this. How much are the two big parties going to be losing power to third and fourth parties over time, and how much is that raising ire with them?
Well,
you want to take that one, Kit, or you got it?
I'm going to say we don't know. Okay. We don't know. So far in San Francisco and Minneapolis, which have used ranked choice voting the longest, we don't see any third parties emerging. But people can vote for them if they, and it may be that the seeing votes come up for those third parties influences what the people who get elected end up doing.
What we found too is that third parties ultimately get a lot more votes than they do in the current system. And they do because the people who prefer those third parties now are no longer worried about spoiling the election by voting for that third party and throwing it to the party they like least. I want to refer back to what we believe will really help third parties and independents break through our two-party duopoly is more proportional representation, if we can get that. At-large city councils, for example, like Cambridge, Massachusetts, if 10% of the population was Green Party and 40% was Democrat and 40% was Republican and 10% was Libertarian, you would have, let's say there's 10 members, you would have 1 Green, 4 Dems, 4 Republicans, and 1 Libertarian. And That would truly allow third parties and independents to break through in a more significant way. Now that's easier said than done, because if you think of the U.S. Congress, we'd have to, put through legislation that would go from single-member U.S. districts, House districts, to multi-member districts, which is it's a big leap from where we're at today. But part of the answer to your question, I think. Diane?
Yes, I'm just wondering, because the whole process can get really complicated. I'm just wondering if there's a way, if you see it as are there any loopholes that you could foresee where people were trying to game this in a certain way? With all the craziness on voting lately, I just don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
That's an excellent question. That's the first thing we who have seen these strategic elections think of. How do you game this? Ranked choice voting is the least susceptible to strategizing of any voting method. The League of Women Voters has done some excellent studies on various voting methods used around the world, and ranked choice voting, it's really hard to game the system, and you have to know so much about other people's votes and their second choices and such, and it could really backfire if you tried to game the system. And the current method that we vote in is the most vulnerable to strategizing.
I would add to that, when you think of the current, we're the first to say that no voting system is perfect. We're just trying to find the best voting system that would work in America, the way our politics is set up today and the way the systems are set up today. The way our current first past the post plurality system works today is the most gameable of any possible system. And the examples I would use, especially in the days of party machine politics, is if Kit was Republican and I was Democrat, we were running against each other. Today, there's nothing to stop a anti-democratic group, a PAC, for example, to find another person to run as a slightly left of center Democrat against the establishment Democrat, split that vote, and then would throw the election to a Republican in a district that, let's say, is solidly Democrat. So the current plurality system is very easy to game, and that's one of the things we think is benefit of ranked choice voting. It's much, much more difficult to game it in that way.
Thanks, that's interesting.
Okay, so I wanted to say that this is being recorded, and so if you want to show your beautiful face when you ask a question, that would be fantastic so that we can show it. And please line up. And one of the things that I've recognized as I was listening to your presentation was that the effect on the division that the country and the strategy of divide and conquer that is being used to undermine our democracy right now, and how this could affect it, even if it doesn't change the outcome necessarily of the elections. We're forced to look at other points of view in order to rank the candidates. So can you comment on that, how this is going to stop and help to sort of reduce the division and bring the country back together and save our democracy?
Thank you, Rich. You said it very well.
Thank you.
It's a mindset. It's not like we have to have this one candidate and everyone else is a schmuck. You could say, well, I like this candidate, but this one I could live with. And it changes our mindset about, as voters, about what we want. Yes. And how we approach politics.
And I would add to that. So imagine just the debate in the public square for any election, whether it's city council or a state assembly member or a US congressperson or president. What we're used to getting oftentimes is two choices, two binary choices, Democrat, Republican. Most people are locked off the debate stage. I mean, imagine if running for president, we had 5 people on the debate stage instead of 2. Even if one of the 2 major parties ends up winning still, imagine how more rich the debate itself would be, and what Americans would be listening to and thinking about, instead of two dominant parties trying to tear the other one apart and make the other one look evil, intrinsically evil. That alone would raise the public discourse in American politics.
Awesome. Julia, I see you raised your hand a couple times, and Laura, did you want to ask a question?
Well, when I first thought about this, I think it would be good at the local level, the state, county, but how, and then, like that would be a new beginning, because doing this voting is a new beginning for some states that haven't tried it. And I think it can work, but I see maybe younger people may be more easy, quick to go with it than someone that might be more set in their ways. And I think y'all have already mentioned that. But how do you do local referendums or things that you want to get passed, like increasing taxes and things like that? Does that have a place in this?
It does, but indirectly, from my perspective anyways, in the sense that when all is said and done, we're all very interested in specific issues that impact our daily lives and the lives of our friends and family. The electoral systems by which so it's the politicians that end up impacting these issues, right? What we're talking about is a system that allows us to vote in politicians that are more representative of us and that are more responsive to us than they are currently, which hopefully then would take care of the issues, the local issues that you have mentioned. Zooming up to a 30,000 foot level, when we talk about national politics, the 2 states that have passed ranked choice voting are Maine and Alaska. And what we found is when, to use a very specific recent example, when the impeachment of Donald Trump came up, very few Republicans voted for that. Well, 2 of the senators that did were Susan Collins in Maine and Lisa Murkowski in Alaska, because now they no longer have to worry about being primary by somebody who's to the right on the political spectrum during their primary, because now they have open primaries. They can compete on a level playing field. Then once they get to the general election, chances are pretty good they're going to be able to win re-election should they choose to run again. And so that frees them to vote their conscience instead of voting party line. So 2 different examples. One is hyper local and one is very national.
Okay, so maybe we have some questions in the chat we can answer. One of the things is, does this really, how about the big money in politics? Is that still going to be a problem even though we have ranked choice voting, or does this have any impact on the influence of big money and contributions by interested parties that are buying our candidates in some respects?
That's still going to be a problem, to be honest. That's a big problem. There's a whole nother branch of reform, campaign finance reform, that's going to take a lot of work. Now, indirectly though, and this sort of is the answer I shared with Julia, if you get better politicians, more responsive politicians, by instituting something like ranked choice voting, you're going to get politicians that are more responsive to our problems with big money in politics. And that can really help at the local level, where you have cities that are willing to institute, let's say, public financing of campaigns and so forth. So But with the Supreme Court's gutting of campaign finance reform at the federal level in 2010 with Citizens United, nationally, it's going to take a lot of work to get some true campaign finance reform passed. But the people who are doing the work are the politicians we put in office. And if we can make better systems for getting those politicians in office, then hopefully we have more responsive politicians who are ready to put through legislation to actually fight some of the bad decisions that have already been made that are impacting big money in politics. It's going to take a long time. And unfortunately, democracy is messy. We have a lot of work to do always for the rest of our lives on these issues.
Well, thanks, Guy. Yeah, one thing we've noticed though in local races is that the negative ads are reduced. And one thing big money is really good at financing is attack ads. So there's not the need. I mean, there's not the use for that kind of big money and that kind of financing. So, and another thing in Washington State, we're thinking of combining a statewide ranked choice voting presidential primary bill with democracy vouchers, which would give every voter, $25 to contribute to a campaign.
Okay.
So that I would love to bundle those together somehow.
And for those who haven't heard of democracy vouchers, every single voter in a district or state, if you pass it statewide, would get vouchers to contribute to their candidates of choice. Kit can speak to this better than I can, but Seattle is the first big city that's passed that. And in the last 2-3 election cycles since it passed, voter participation and candidate diversity has gone way up. Kit, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but from everything I've read and studied about the success of vouchers in Seattle, it leads me to believe that that's a powerful way of counteracting big money in politics.
It is. It's been a great program. And I guess it's the first in the country. I forgot. You all are not from Washington. Yes, the democracy vouchers are working really well in Seattle, and we're hoping to expand the program.
Yeah, we're working on it on a few cities here in California as well. Mark has asked a question in the chat. If we join one of the RCV organizations, what kinds of things can we do to help out? So lots of things. Typically, organizations, it depends on where they're at in their growth curve, but things like canvassing, tabling at farmers markets, trying to get more supporters, donors, volunteers, phone banking. Sometimes you have donors who don't have the time to contribute, but they want to donate, but maybe they attended a meeting 3 months ago and they forgot about it. Phone bankers call them up and say, hey, would you like to turn your $5 a month or $5 one-time donation into $5 a month? So all sorts of various things. We have organizations in various states where, let's say you don't have the money to contribute or the time to contribute, but you're an expert at graphic design and you do have a little time to help out on occasion with a design project to help the website look better. So it depends, it could be any number of things, and it depends on the organization and what you'd want to contribute in terms of time or contributions. So,
or you can write a letter to the editor wherever you are. Yeah, they're whatever you're good at. So David asked, do we have access to this video? How do they get the video, Rich?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to send the video to everyone. It may take a few weeks, but I'm going to produce a show, sort of edit it, and I'll be posting it. I'll send it to everybody who's on the Google group list. So I think we have Lawrence with his hand up. Go ahead, Lawrence.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, I have a stupid question. I maybe missed it. So we have like ranked choice voting. So we vote for 1, 2, 3, whatever, and whoever gets the 50% more wins. Now, do you have another election if somebody doesn't reach the 50%? Nobody reaches the 50%. Is there another election?
No, we keep going through the rounds, and then if someone say if a lot of people vote for some unpopular candidate and they only vote for that candidate and they don't have another choice, their votes are not counted in the last round.
Okay,
And
so,
that's sort of like voting in the primary and then not coming back to vote in the general election.
I see, so.
So you'll get down to the last round. We'll have two candidates. Yeah. And unless it's a tie.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Good question. Oh, one thing that's going to happen in Alaska is they instituted ranked choice voting, and what they're going to do is hold a primary election. And in some of the races, they have a lot of candidates. They're going to take the top 4. They're not going to do ranked choice voting in the primary. They're going to take the top 4 out of the primary and then do a ranked choice election with those 4. So that's a different variation on ranked choice voting. So that would take a primary and a general. In Washington, we had a provision in our proposed legislation. If there are more than 6 candidates in a race, and we have 35 people running for Seattle mayor, if you have more than 6 candidates in a race, we have a ranked choice primary, and the top 5 candidates go to the general election, and we have another ranked choice election. So the primary, if there's a large field of candidates, we have a winnowing primary so that people aren't faced with having to rank 30 candidates. In the primary, you might rank your top 6, and then in that primary would lead to the 5 candidates in the general.
So is this used in other countries? Could this be used on a national level?
Oh yeah, Australia's used it for over 100 years. And New Zealand uses it, Malta, Northern Ireland, Scotland, India. The Academy Awards uses ranked choice voting for Best Picture. And Robert's Rules of Order recommends ranked choice voting when you have an election and people can't be in the same room.
In addition to those countries, there are a lot of Western democracies, or I shouldn't say just Western, modern democracies that don't use it, but they have multi-member districts, parliamentary type systems where their democratic systems are already more representative of their people, more proportionally representative. So ranked choice voting really becomes powerful when you're in a system like ours that is primarily single member districts and winner take all type systems. It's an improvement upon that, but it won't get us to the mixed member proportional representation of a country, let's say like the Scandinavian countries or Germany or countries like that. That would take a constitutional amendment, right, which is a lot harder to do, especially in today's polarization.
Okay, so that would take a constitutional amendment, because what you're talking about are some of the best and most stable democracies in the world. Scandinavian countries, Australia, New Zealand,
right.
Canada. Does Canada use?
No.
But Canada's still a great democracy. So we have Karen asking a question here about whether ranked choice voting won't cross gerrymandered district lines. You see that question?
Mm-hmm.
I do see that question. Now, Karen is a good thinker here. So gerrymandering is a problem because with gerrymandered districts, 51% of the voters get all representation and 49% of the voters get nothing. So ranked choice voting, in proportional ranked choice voting, we can combine 3 districts. So erase the line between 3 districts and elect 3 representatives in one ranked choice election. The bigger the district, the harder it is to gerrymander. So people in those 3 districts, if you have 30% of the people should get one of the representatives. And you don't have to draw a special minority majority district in order to weave those people together if they're not, living in the same neighborhood. So this is sometimes used for Voting Rights Act cases when people say that people aren't getting representation. And sometimes it's just impossible to draw a district that combines enough of a minority group to get them a representative.
So one of the things, this is about, not so much about promoting third parties, although third parties probably have an interest in this, but it's also about creating more representative government. But it's still, you have the same person usually wins who gets the most votes anyway. But also, it's about more than that. It's about making a more maybe civil discussion and getting people exposed to different ideas, different parties, different ways of seeing things. And I think that that's important. Go ahead.
I want to go back to Karen's question. There is a national bill called the Fair Representation Act that's been presented for many years. It's not going anywhere right now, but it would be great. It allows for proportional representation for Congress people. And so they're suggesting like increasing the number of representatives in the House of Representatives, because we haven't increased the number of representatives in a long time. I don't have the numbers, but
like in 150 years, it's been a long time. Yeah, like since the mid 1800s. Yeah.
So if they're thinking of, say, increasing the number of representatives, turning Washington State into 2 districts and electing representatives, in a pool from these 2 districts. And so then it's really hard to gerrymander, 2 districts when you've got, say, 6 representatives coming from each district.
Yeah, so ranked choice voting in and of itself does not eliminate gerrymandering, because we still live in a country where most of our districts at the state and federal level are single member districts. We do want to get to a point where we can pass legislation that would combine single member districts into multi-member districts, which would make it near impossible to gerrymander. And you would have several representatives coming out of any given multi-member district that would be proportionally representative of the population. So you would have, for example, here in California, instead of having a state house that's really dominated by one party, instead of being 75% Democrat and 25% Republican, it might be 65-35. It would be more representative of the people. You could be a Republican in California and have your voice heard, or you could be a Democrat in Wyoming or Arkansas and have your voice heard. What we believe that would do, and what it has done in places where RCV exists, is it raises participation, because people now believe that their voice would be heard.
Yeah, and just to repeat, we're talking about 2 different ways that ranked choice voting is used. One way is for a single winner, like a mayor or a governor, and that's sometimes called instant runoff voting. And that's the easiest to understand, and we're promoting that more strongly than proportional ranked choice voting, because it is easier to understand. It's more like the pilot program. And then when we're electing a council or several representatives, that's called proportional ranked choice voting. And you really start to see some big improvements with that, but it is more challenging to understand. So, but it's very transparent in all these methods. You can see what's happening round by round. The election officials can publish things absolutely as transparently as they can now.
I want to thank everybody. Somebody's just coming in at the last minute, but I want to thank everybody. Can you tell us, how can we get involved in ranked choice voting efforts?
Yeah, well, I noticed when people were signing in at the beginning of this call that there were a ton of you from California. So in the chat, I'm dropping in a link with California specific stuff. I'm also going to put in my email, so feel free to email me and then we can connect. And I'm happy to connect you further with folks in California. And then Kit just dropped in the chat a list of state groups. So I saw a few people join us from Georgia, a couple other states represented here today. Please click on that, and there are groups in every state in the country that are working on this, and that would be glad to have your help.
Thank you. If you have any last comments, Kit, or
I just want to thank everybody for taking part of your May 1st Sunday afternoon to listen to things about elections. I used to think politics and elections was just dreadful. And now I have hope, and it's creative and, better math and
And I would echo Kit's comments. Like, thank you guys. It's an honor to get to talk about these things, and it's an honor to know that as citizens we can make a difference, right? We can move the needle, and we can make our democracy more fair and representative for everybody, and that's exciting. And it's really exciting to get to share all of that with you. So thank you, and thank you, Rich, for hosting us.
you're welcome. Thank you so much for being here, for providing this with us. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Guy and Kit. Great job. Great presentation. Everybody loved it. And I'm so happy. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye now.